Why would I do this? I would not court and date her now.
Crew, seatbelt. Because what you are about to learn is something the network never wanted you to. We have all read the headlines, mansion foreclosures, lawsuits, fraud. But behind all of that, buried in court records and secret testimony, is the actual bombshell, the $5 million fraud that nobody outside of the courtroom had ever put together. And it all began the instant the judge said the words Kody Brown dreaded. Mr. Brown, you are hereby ordered to testify under oath. Consider that for a moment. Kody has had years of dodging, weaving, and spinning. On television, he dictators the story. Behind the scenes, he dictators the budget. But in court, under oath, no cutoff point, no cameras he can choreograph, just unvarnished truth and the sort of accountability he has managed to stay away from for an entire lifetime. Now, before we go inside that courtroom, team, hit that like button, subscribe, and the bell, because we're not just discussing drama. We're revealing the receipts, and I promise you, you want to be here when the next installments, because every time there is another reveal that adds up to larger culminate betrayal, millions lost, and the complete downfall of the Browns' empire. Here is the set. Christine and Janelle sitting shoulder to shoulder, attorneys ready with binder as thick as brick. Robin, in that rehearsed expression of quiet, holding a folder like it is her salvation. Mary quiet, but there, eyes flashing, jaw set, aware the truth was about to be unleashed. And then Kody walking into the courtroom like a man who still thought he could talk his way out of anything, his hair in a ponytail, his suit pressed. But those eyes, crew, those eyes were frantically moving. That was not confidence. That was the expression of a cornered man. As the bailiff swore him in, Christine's attorney leaned forward. You could sense it. The moment everyone had been waiting for. Attorney, Mr. Brown, do you realize that you are under oath? Kody, I do. Attorney, and do you understand that lying under oath is perjury? Kody, yes. Boom, right there. That is the sound of his control slipping away. Because the first question wasn't about his show, or his marriages, or even the nanny scandal. No, crew. The first question went right to the jugular. Attorney, Mr. Brown, can you explain the $5 million sent in shell accounts linked to Kody Past Development? LLC silent. The courtroom came to a standstill. Robin's hold on her folder tighter. Christine's attorney didn't. Janelle, for once, gave herself the slightest of grin. And Kody, he stammered. He shuffled his paper. He requested clarification. Classic Kody, stalling, buying time. But that wasn't a confessional couch. That was a court of law. And that was the moment, crew, when the $5 million scam nobody knew about finally cracked open. But let me pause here. Because what follows, how Kody attempted to spin, how the witness evidence tore apart his defense, and how Robin's so-called nest egg was not merely a family, but the loophole in the scam, alters everything. Stay glued in, crew. Part 2 is where the walls begin closing. Okay, team. Let's get back to where we were. The lawyer's inquiry regarding those $5 million was not a random question. It was a trap, one well laid, supported by months of records, subpoenas, and forensic accountant who had tracked every penny. Kody tugged at his tie, cleared his throat, and hunched over the microphone. You could see him struggling to recreate that same bravado he has in front of the camera. But his voice shook ever so slightly. Kody, I don't remember the details of that transaction. The lawyer jumped on it. Attorney, you don't remember. Mr. Brown, are you telling me that $5 million just flowed through your family's business and you have no recollection of it? Kody shifted restlessly. Robin leaned forward, speaking softly, but the judge stopped her. Judge Mrs. Brown, you will be silent while your husband is being direct questioned. And it was done. Robin sank back, her face rigid, her folder so tight she turned her knuckles white. The attorney continued. Attorney, let me remind you, Mr. Brown, we have records of a transfer on the 14th of March, transferring from the Kody Past Development account to a Nevada company registered under a proxy name. How much? $2.3 million, and 2 weeks thereafter. Another transfer, this one for $2.7 million. All told, that is $5 million. Exactly. Do you deny these transfers? The courtroom was silent. The air itself seemed heavy. Kody looked down, flipping through his paper, searching for some lifeline. And then, finally, he muttered, I'll need to consult with my accountant. That was it. The moment the crew had been waiting for. A man who built his life on controlling the narrative couldn't answer a simple question about $5 million. Christine's attorney sat back. Please. Janelle nodded curtly. Even Mary, stone-faced as she'd been, seemed to grant herself a moment of acknowledgement, like she knew that truth she'd always had suspicions about was finally being pulled into the daylight. But the lawyer wasn't finished yet. Attorney, we'll get to the transfer, Mr. Brown. For the time being, let's discuss the so-called nest. You can tell the court how you, publicly, described the family fund as a collective savings account, wound up in an account held solely under your wife, Robin. Boom. Another bombshell. Robin's eyes grew wide. She nodded her head ever so slightly, as if to tell Kody not to respond. But this was not a closed family meeting. This was not TLC editing the show. This was under oath, Kody. That was a misunderstanding. Attorney, a misunderstanding. Because the account records are quite clear. Robin Brown, sole owner. Nothing mentioned about Christine. Nothing mentioned about Janelle. Nothing mentioned about Mary. Just Robin. How can you square that with your frequent public declarations that the nest egg was for the future of the whole family? And that, folks, is when the courtroom blew up, gasps from the crowd. Christine shaking her head, muttering in disgust. Janelle whispering angrily to her attorney. Even Mary, quiet Mary, actually raised her eyebrows in shock. The judge slammed the gavel. Judge, order in the court. But the harm was inflicted. The words were spoken. The so-called nest egg, the supposed safety fund of the family, had been revealed as a single owner account in Robin's name. That wasn't merely a discovery. That was betrayal made official in black and crew. If you thought that was the end of it, you are wrong. Because what came next was even more incriminating. A witness was brought in who had the receipt. Someone who knew precisely where the cash went and how it was concealed. Stick with me. In part 3, the evidence that tore apart Kody's defense for good is the main event. Okay, let's go. Part 3, and this is where the walls begin. The judge called the next witness, and when the name was read out, you could see the jaw of Kody clench straight away. This wasn't a random witness. This was a person from the inside, someone who had witnessed the money trail firsthand. The bailiff swore her in. She moved to the stand, steady and calm, with a folder so thick it had the appearance of choking a shredder. She was already being whispered about by name in the courtroom. Onto hired gun by the Brown, an accountant brought in to sort through their complicated mess of business account. But what she uncovered was not chaos. What she uncovered was purposeful. Attorney, please say your name for the record. Witness, my name is Hannah Lewis. I am a forensic accountant with expertise in financial fraud investigation. Attorney, and were you retained at any time by Mr. Brown or his related businesses? Witness, yes. In 2019, I was retained to investigate the financial framework of Kody Past Development, LLC, and related account. You might notice Robin's lips compressed to a thin line. Kody sat back, arms crossed like a man preparing for the attorney. And what did you find? Witness, a systematic diversion of funds. Funds that were publicly characterized as family saving were diverted into private accounts. Specifically, an account in Robin Brown's name with Kody Brown designated secondary beneficiary. Gasps spread throughout the courtroom. Christine's hand went over her mouth. Janelle nodded vigorously as she scribbled madly and nodded. Even Mary, so long in silence, mouthed the word unbelievable. The lawyer pressed on. Attorney, can you provide us with numbers, Miss Lewis? Witness, during a span of 3 years, about $5 million was wired into that account. The payments were broken up into small amounts, frequently disguised as vendor payment or development. But when they were tracked down, the vendors didn't. They were shell company. Boom. There it was. Hard evidence, not rumor, not speculation. Receipts. Kody shifted, his hands clasped tightly, his face red. Robin looked down, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Attorney, in your professional opinion, miss, was this an error in bookkeeping or deliberate misrepresentation? Witness, it was deliberate. No question. And with that one sentence, crew, the Browns' defense cracked wide open. The judge leaned forward. Even he seemed struck by the bluntness of the testimony. Judge, Mr. Brown, do you want to respond to what this witness is saying? Kody, this is totally taken out of context. We're a big family with complicated finance. Things get missed. But the witness wasn't being swayed. Witness, with respect, Your Honor, these weren't errors. These were planned transfers made again and again over a period of years, intended to conceal funds from other members of the family. The courtroom shifted again. Christine whispered something to Janelle, something that made Janelle's eyes draw tight. And Robin, she seemed paralyzed, as if the walls enclosing her carefully constructed facade were crumbling brick by brick. Crew, this was not about conjecture any. This was a professional, an expert swearing under oath that Kody and Robin had built a $5 million scam right before their own face. But here's the twist. This witness wasn't alone in wanting to, because the next individual to testify wasn't an outsider. It was a member of the inner circle, a person whom the Browns never expected would turn against and their account. Not only did it tear apart Kody's defense, it destroyed it. Stick with me, team. Part 4 is where the betrayal is internal. Okay, crew, part 4. And this one hurt more than any money guru could have done, because this was a betrayal from within the family. The clerk called the next witness, and when the name was heard ringing through the courtroom, you felt the anticipation crackle like a whip. Gwendolyn Brown, please take the stand. Yes, Christine's daughter. Kody's very own flesh and blood. You could watch Kody's face. Robin stood stock, still, her mouth open in shock. Christine stood up. eyes on her daughter with a combination of fear and pride. The bailiff swore her in, and Gwendolyn approached the stand with firm step. She wasn't holding binders or folders. She didn't require them. What she held was memory, and memory was enough. Attorney, Miss Brown, you are aware that you are giving testimony under oath. Gwendolyn, I am. Attorney, and are you aware of financial transactions made by your father, Mr. Kody Brown? Gwendolyn, yes. More than he believes I know. The room changed. Folks leaned in. Even the judge leaned his head. Gwendolyn went, I heard things when I was a kid. Dad wasn't so sly as he believed. I recall times when he and Robin would be in the kitchen late at night, after everyone was asleep, discussing how to move money so Mom, Christine, couldn't get her hands. Christine's eyes welled up with tears. Janelle slowly shook her head, as if all that she had suspected is now being firm. Mary sat silent, looking straight ahead, unreadable. Attorney, do you remember particular occasions, Gwendolyn? Yes. I overheard Dad explaining to Robin in 2020 that the nest egg would safeguard them if the other wives departed, that it was their insurance policy, and that the rest of us would never be able to trace where the money went because it would all appear to be land investments. Gasped, as if by a knife, not from From his own daughter, Kody's attorney attempted to object. Your Honor, this is... But the judge let it pass, observing that testimony about state made by the defendant himself. Wait. Attorney, Miss Brown, why are you coming forward now? Gwendolyn, because I saw my mom struggle. I saw Janelle have to fight for what was hers while Dad and Robin got to live in a house that cost almost $1 million. And I know how that It wasn't a matter of bad management. It was intentional. Kody leaned forward, his tone acidic, slicing through the courtroom. Kody, you don't know what you are saying. You are just a kid. But Gwendolyn didn't waver. She leaned into the mic. Gwendolyn, I understand enough to know you stole from silence, thick, immovable. The kind of silence that doesn't merely fill a room. It chokes. Christine looked down, crying open. Janelle nodded in grim accord. Robin, she wiped her face, but not with tears. More frustration, like the mask she'd carried so skillfully, was at last beginning to crack. And the judge. He hunched forward, his voice steady but cutting. Judge, Mr. Brown, I advise you to keep quiet unless addressed directly. Interruptions are not acceptable. Crew, and suddenly the tide was against him. No longer accountants and lawyers standing. It was family, his children, who took the witness stand against him. And if you think that is heavy, wait until you hear who followed. Because the next witness wasn't just a family member. It was somebody who had run the show itself. Somebody who had receipts not only of cash, but of contracts, negotiations, and the deals that held everything together. That is where the story moved from personal betrayal to network. Stick with me. Part 5 is where the secrets of TLC come to light. All right, crew. Part 5. This is where the walls that the Browns had built around TLC began to tumble down. The clerk called the next witness, a former production manager for TLC, not some flunky, but somebody who was there when the contracts were negotiated, when the money was disseminated, and most crucially, the payments the network made directly to Kody. The guy came in with a thin briefcase, unfazed, composed, as if he already knew the judge's podium was on the verge of turning his favor. Attorney, sir, can you tell us your name and your position at TLC? Witness, my name is Thomas Keegan. I was a production manager for Sister Wives for 8. My job was budget oversight, payroll allocation, and cast negotiation. The oxygen escaped the room. Everyone knew what was to come. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't opinion. This was inside truth, attorney. Mr. Keegan, as part of your position, did you have first-hand knowledge of how money was distributed to the Brown family? Keegan, yes. Each wife had her own contract, but Kody insisted that the checks go through him. He said it was to streamline the family finance. Christine's face cinched up. Janelle mouthed the phrase, I knew it. Keegan went, what most of the wives did not know is that Kody had a secondary contract, one that made him an extra executive producer fee, close to $200,000 a season. That money never appeared in the family's joint budget. The courtroom gasped. Robin squirmed in her seat. Kody's jaw clenched, his hands tightening their grip on the table so hard his knuckles whitened. The attorney went on. Attorney, so you're saying Mr. Brown not only controlled the family's pooled income, but also received an additional payout the others weren't aware of? Keegan, yes. And that wasn't the beginning and end of it. In subsequent seasons, TLC approved a discretionary fund of $500,000 for Kody to cover production-related costs, but rather than spending it on the show, much of it was funneled into a private LLC associated with Kody and Robin. Boom. There it was. Not rumor, not innuendo. Sealed evidence from a person who negotiated the contract. Kody's attorney jumped up. Defense. Objection beyond the scope. Judge. Overruled. Mr. Keegan. Proceed. Keegan opened his briefcase. Out came documentation of wire transfers, email approval, and ledger entry. He pushed them across to the court clerk, who handed them to the judge. Mr. Brown, do you deny that these accounts are yours? Kody pauses. They were business decisions. The family didn't need to know every detail. Judge, that is not an. Do you or do you not admit ownership of Kody? Yes, but. And in that instant, the word yes was the fissure that allowed the entire. Christine relaxed back, breathing hard, as if all those years of being frustrated had just been justified. Janelle closed her eyes and breathed softly. Finally, Mary sat still, but her trembling hand in her lap betrayed her. Robin, she gazed at Kody like she was looking at him for the first time, not as her savior, but as the builder of their destruction. The big revelation. Keegan wasn't only revealing fiscal mismanagement, he was showing that TLC itself had been getting complaints from the other wives years before. Christine and Janelle both emailed asking where the money went, but TLC dismissed it, claiming Kody was in charge of the family's finance, which meant TLC wasn't an innocent bystander. They were an enabler. The judge leaned forward, hands clasped. Judge, Mr. Keegan, do you think that these funds were used improperly? Keegan, yes, Your Honor. They were sent off from contractual considerations and interpersonal investments that bore no relation to the show. That single sentence changed everything. This wasn't family soap opera. This was corporate fraud, family betrayal, and the collapse of a carefully constructed public image for more than 10 years. And as the courtroom digested it all, the judge dropped a bombshell announcement that resonated like a clap of thunder. Considering the seriousness of these claims, this court will be serving subpoenas to TLC executives for additional testimony. The room went wild. Cameras outside the courthouse would go crazy with this news. Judge drags TLC into Brown family fraud trial. But here's the kicker you won't believe. Team, the next witness wasn't TLC, not the family. It was from someone Kody believed was his friend, someone who had been his business partner in the $5 million side venture. And when they testified in Part 6, the treachery cut deeper than Kody ever could have anticipated. Okay, crew, Part 6, buckle up. Because this was the part that Kody never ended. The clerk called the next witness, a previous business associate of Kody, with direct ties to the $5 million. When the name was announced, Kody's head shot up like he'd been struck by a hammer. His lips parted, and for the first time during all trial, he looked scared. Mr. Daniel Whitmore, please take the stand. Whitmore entered slowly and deliberately, not in a suit like the attorney, not in family casual like the family. No, he had on that crisp, no-nonsense attire of a man who had spent his time in courtroom. The bailiff administered the oath, and as soon as he was seated, you felt the air grow thick with tension. Attorney, Mr. Whitmore, can you tell us about your relationship with Mr. Kody Brown? Whitmore, yes, we were business associates. We created a real estate investment company in Faye. The promise was that we'd invest investor funds into land ventures at Coyote Pass in Nevada. Kody told me it would be a family legacy. Christine shook her head, muttering under her breath. Janelle crossed her arms tightly, as if she'd sensed this tale was inevitable. Attorney, and did the company prosper? Whitmore, no, because Kody misdirected funds. Of the Faye million we took from investors, almost Faye million ended up in personal accounts. He filtered it through shell corporations, saying they were for development expenses. Actually, it paid for Robin's mansion, luxury, and ironically, the nanny's salary everybody was asking. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, people fidgeting. The judge banged the gavel. Kody's lawyer, defense. Objection, Your Honor. This guy has motive to discredit my client. He is getting sued himself. But Whitmore didn't waver. He leaned forward toward the microphone. Whitmore, that is right. I am getting sued, but I kept records. Unlike Kody, every transfer, every false invoice, every email where he instructed me to make it go away. And then he produced a binder, heavy, thick. He slammed it on the witness stand so forcefully the mic crackled. This, he said, is every document demonstrating how Kody masterminded this fraud. The clerk received it, handing it to the judge. The courtroom fell silent once, the sort of silence that is like a storm gathering above. Attorney, Mr. Whitmore, why are you testifying? Whitmore, because I'm done covering for him. Initially, I used to believe in the family man facade he sold everyone. But once investors began questioning where their money went, Kody instructed me to say it was because Christine left, that the family's instability kept developers away. He blamed his wife. That was the final straw. Christine paled. Janelle launched into a cynical laugh. Mary's fingers closed in her lap. Robin, she was trapped, staring at Whitmore, her lips thin to a line. Kody cracked. Kody, you're lying. You were just as guilty as I was. Whitmore turned to him, serene as stone. Whitmore, perhaps, but I am not the one who hid the money. The judge raised a hand. Judge, Mr. Brown, you will stay silent unless you're spoken to directly. Another outburst, and I'll have you held in contempt. Crew, here is where things got crazy. Whitmore explained that Kody not only took money for his own lifestyle, but was going to relocate even more into an offshore account, secreted under a trust, that he had created for Robin and her kids alone. None of the OG Feywives, none of the older children would ever have seen a single. The courtroom gasped again. Christine broke down in tears, whispered, I knew. Janelle closed her eyes, shaking. Mary finally looked away from Kody, like whatever shred of loyalty still came. And the judge, his voice sharp, final. Judge, Mr. Whitmore, these documents you've provided, they may form the basis of federal fraud charges. This court will take them under immediate. Kody leaned back in his chair. For the first time, the man who never moved like he was invincible seemed tiny. But team, if you think that was the finisher, you're mistaken. Because in part 7, the judge summoned someone no one saw coming. Not a wife, not a business partner, not even it was one of Kody's own children, and their testimony would cut deeper than any money record ever could. Okay, crew, part 7. And this is where the courtroom ceased to be figures, agreements, or investors. This was about the naked human price of Kody's decision. The clerk's voice echoed, please welcome to the stand Peden Brown, Christine's son, Kody's, a young man who had never hesitated to speak his truth outside the lens. But here, under oath, his words had a different weight. The bailiff administered the oath to him, and Peden sat up straight. He did not shuffle. He did not fidget. He met his father's gaze, and Kody would not look. Attorney, Mr. Brown, can you explain to the court why you are here today, Peden? Because I survived the aftermath of his lies. I witnessed how it affected my mom. I witnessed how it affected us children. He didn't only take money, he took trust, he took security. He lied to us and said we had to give up so he could support the family. But he was only supporting Robin. The room drew in tight. Crew, you might have heard a pin drop, attorney. Do you have first-hand knowledge of your father's financial transactions? Peden, yes. I did odd work for him at Coyote Pass. He would boast of how investors were waiting in line, how he was the smartest man in the room, but then I watched the checks bounce, contractors calling, telling me they hadn't been paid. I even received calls, at my age, from people who assumed I could reach him because he wasn't returning. Christine covered her face, her shoulders shaking. Janelle's eyes welled up. Mary locked her gaze straight in front of her, her jaw clamped. And Robin, she shook her head gently, as though she couldn't equate the words to the man beside her. And then came the time no one anticipated. Attorney, Mr. Brown, in your own words, how would you describe your father's behavior during this time? Peden leaned forward. His voice didn't tremble. Peden, he was a liar, a manipulator. And the thing is, he believed what he said. He'd sit us down, look us in the eye, and tell us he was building a future. But that future was only for him and her children. Everyone else expendable. The audience gasped. Christine wept openly now, tears streaming. Janelle reached over, grasping Christine's hand. Kody, how could you say that to me? I raised you. I fed you. Judge, bangs gavel, Mr. Brown. That is it. One more thing, and you'll be led out of your own trial. Peden didn't blink. He simply turned his head slowly and stared at his father dead in the eye. Peden, you didn't raise us. Mom did. Janelle did. Mary did. You just appeared when the cameras... Boom! The air was drawn out of the room, that line bit deeper than all the bank statements and contracts together. Kody folded back in his chair. Robin touched his arm, but he brushed her away, his face flushing, his breathing labored, and the judge. He waited for a moment of silence before he said anything. Judge, this testimony, coupled with the financial evidence we already have, presents a disturbing scenario. Tomorrow, we will bring in closing witnesses before going to... Outside the courthouse, the media was... Headlines blaze. Brown children testify against father in $5 million fraud trial. On each network, commentators hotly discussed whether the show was reality television or the longest-running con game cable. But what no one knew at this point, what not even the families anticipated, was that the last witness wasn't a child, wasn't a wife, and wasn't a business associate. It was someone within the court system itself, someone who had been following Kody's money trail for years. And when they testified in Part 8, the case would turn from shocking to completely heartbreaking. All right, crew, Part 8. And if you ever figured we'd already reached the ceiling for shock, think again, because this is where the case went from scandal to sheer devastation. The clerk's voice echoed through the courtroom. Special Agent Rebecca Hensley, Financial Crimes Division, please take the stand. That is correct. A federal agent, not TLC, not a wife, not a business partner. A government investigator who had been discreetly following Kody's financial activity long before this trial even started. The atmosphere in the room changed. Everyone knew this wasn't family drama, it was federal. The bailiff administered her oath. She smoothed her blazer, sat down, and put a thick file on the stand. Calm, professional, unwavering. Attorney, Agent Hensley, can you tell us your role in this matter? Hensley, yes. I am assigned to the Financial Crimes Division. Over the last 3 years, we've been tracking suspicious transfers associated with Mr. Kody Brown. The figures, recipients, and means indicated willful efforts to conceal funds from family members as well as investors. The courtroom fell quiet. Christine hunched forward, holding the edge of the bench. Janelle caught a rapid glance from her. Mary's mouth was compressed into a thin line. Robin went white. Attorney, what type of irregularities discussing? Hensley, wire transfers channeled through several shell companies, cash withdrawals slightly below reporting level, and offshore accounts in the name of a trust, one with only Robin and her children named as beneficiary. Crew, the response was immediate. Gas, a low rumble coursed through the gallery. The judge held up his hand for order, but even he could not stifle the gravity of what was heard. Attorney, and what was the total amount involved in these transfers? Hensley opened the file calmly, practically cold. Hensley, about $5 million. Boom, the figure. The $5 million swindle, presented on a plate by a federal agent with receipt. Defense, Your Honor, this is preposterous. These alleged transfers might have explanation. Hensley interrupted. Chris, Hensley, each one is on record. I have the bank records, the wire confirmations, and the corresponding email. Every single step was intentional. And every single step excluded Christine, Janelle, and Mary. Christine's hand went to her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes. Janelle lowered her head, closing her eyes tightly. Mary sat stone, silent, still, but her hands shook slightly in her lap. Robin, she cried. For the first time, she openly wept, whispering, shoulders trembling, guilt, maybe fear, or perhaps both. Nobody. The judge leaned forward. Judge, Agent Hensley, in your expert opinion, were these funds misappropriated to the extent that it is fraud? Hensley, yes, Your Honor, beyond any reasonable doubt. And with it, the courtroom no longer seemed to be sitting in judgment of a family matter. It seemed the Brown dynasty was collapsing before their very eyes. The lawyer finished in with one last question. Attorney, Agent Hensley, why now? Hensley, because the statute of limitations is running out on some of these transfers, and because the victims, including his own wives and children, deserve restitution. That one word, restitution, rang through the chamber like thunder. Kody leaned back, sweat beading on his forehead. His attorney whispered hysterically in his ear, but he didn't flinch. His gaze flicked from the judge, the wives, to his children, as if a man trapped with no escape. Crew, it was no longer a trial, and it was a reckoning. But here's the bit that will surprise you the most. The judge wasn't finished. He declared that before the court adjourned, there would be a final testimony. A person who had been quiet till then, but whose words would seal Kody's doom. And when they testified in Part 9, it wasn't testimony that tore him down. It was truth spoken from the heart. Okay, crew, Part 9. And here is where the trial ceased being about documents, figures, and agreement, and turned into something that no spreadsheet could quantify: the human truth. The clerk's tone was gentler this time, nearly hesitant. Please welcome to the stand, Mary Brown. The room stood still. Christine's eyes went wide. Janelle sat back in her chair. Even Robin, wiping away her tear, jerked her head towards Mary in shock. Because for years, Mary had been the quiet, the first wife, the one who remained silent even as the world had wondered at her suffering. But now, under oath, she was going to talk. The bailiff administered the oath. Mary stood slowly, moved to the stand with deliberate steps, and sat. She did not carry file. She did not carry binder. She carried something more weighty, decades of silence poised to shatter. Attorney, Mrs. Brown, you've heard the testimony given here today. Why have you decided to testify? Mary pauses, then firm. Because I've lived this story longer than anybody. I was there before the television show, before the cameras, before the money, and I saw how Kody transformed, how he substituted loyalty for greed, how he abandoned us one by one. Her voice did not crack. Her voice did not shake. It sliced like glass. Attorney, do you have personal knowledge of his financial misconduct? Marie, yes. He dominated every TLC check was deposited into accounts I didn't even have access. I trusted him. We all did. But when the bank statements arrived, I saw charges that didn't align with our lives. Luxury vehicle, designer jewelry, private excursion. And when I confronted him, he said I was paranoid, that I didn't get the courtroom. Christine covered her mouth, shaking her head. Janelle looked down at her lap, was brimming. Robin sat motionless, looking at Mary. Words were dagger. Mary leaned forward in toward Mary. But here is the truth. He never wanted us to know. Because if we did, we'd know the future he was creating wasn't for all of it. It was only for him and Rob. The hush was oppressive. Even the judge allowed her to speak uninterrupted. Mary, I remained silent too long. I allowed myself to think that loyalty implied silence. But silence is what permitted this. Silence is what permitted him to steal millions while the rest of us were struggling. Silence is what permitted him to make the world believe he was a provider when he was actually a thief. She spoke louder, her tone resolute. Mary, and I'm done being silent. Crew, it was like a dam broke, not just for her, but for the entire courtroom. Christine wept openly. Janelle nodded fierce, whispered, yes. Even Peden, still seated nearby, wiped his eye. And Kody, he couldn't look at her. For the first time, his bravado was gone. He stared at the table, jaw tight, eyes glassy. The judge hunched forward. His words had the certainty of a gavel already crashing. Judge, this testimony, in conjunction with the financial documentation provided, reveals a consistent and disturbing pattern. Closing arguments will proceed here tomorrow. Mr. Brown, you prepare yourself for repercussion. The gavel came down. Court was adjourned. Reporters who worked outside shrieked question. Cameras flashed. Headlines blazed. Mary breaks her silence. Testimony seals Kody's fate. But within that courtroom, as individuals streamed out, the emotion wasn't victory. It wasn't shock. It was inevitability. Crew. The tale doesn't stop here. Because in Chapter 10, the last one, the verdict is handed. And when the judge does, Kody's entire empire does not merely crack. It shattered. Okay, crew, Chapter 10, the last. The reckoning day. The courtroom was filled. Each seat occupied, every corner abuzz with expectation. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. Family members huddled in close groups, bound not by affection, but by the seriousness of what was to come. And then, the voice of the clerk, y'all rise. Court is now in session. The judge walked in, robes flowing, face impassive. He sat down, rustled paper, then stared at Kody Brown. Judge, this court has heard extensive evidence. We have been presented with bank statements, contracts, and under oaths. We have heard from those closest, your wives, your children. Tell us about not only financial incompetence, but willful. Today, this court hands down it. You could have heard a pin drop. The judge went on, his voice firm but biting. Mr. Brown, it is the conclusion of this court that used fraudulent financial device, diverting funds meant for the family trust into individual account. You deceived those who trusted you most of all. You used your position as head of the household not to provide, but to pillage. This court thus orders the repayment forthwith of $5 million in damage and limitations on your use of joint family account. In addition, he stopped. Everyone bunched up for breath. Judge, you are ordered to testify further on ongoing state investigations of tax evasion and financial hiding. Non-compliance will lead to criminal charges. Gasp whisper. Christine gripped Janelle's hand. Mary sat stiffly, her jaw clenched but eyes aglow, not with vengeance, but with exoneration. Robin covered her face in her hand, whispering wildly to her attorney and Kody. He just sat there in shock. His blonde hair dropped over his face as he shook his head. The smug smile was... The courtroom cameras picked up everything. The instant the patriarch was the defendant, the gavel came down. Court adjourned. But the saga didn't end in that room. In the lobby outside, pandemonium broke out. Headlines were already rolling. Kody Brown found liable in $5 million scam. Judge orders sister wives star to take stand in ongoing fraud case. Reporters surrounded her. Microphones abound. Christine emerged first, quiet but determined. This isn't about winning, she declared. It is about truth. And the truth finally came out. Janelle emerged next, filling in. He thought we'd never talk. But silence doesn't shield you forever. And finally, Mary, the last of the three to remain silent, she paused, turned to the cameras, and said just one thing. Justice isn't loud, but it is final. Behind them, Kody left with his attorneys, protectors surrounding him. But the cameras captured the anger, humiliation, and the burden of a legacy crumbling. Crew, this is the part no one speaks. This was not a court win. It was the dismantling of decades of domination. The wives, once silent, now had louder voices than ever. The kids, once afraid to speak out, were watching their dad be held accountable. And the empire Kody created based on secrets and manipulation was no longer to claim. The $5 million fraud wasn't about money. It was about control. And when the judge made Kody take the stand, that control was taken. And so it comes to an end here with the man who had proclaimed to be the leader of a family of oneness standing alone today, with debts, with investigations, and a shattered legacy crew. The Browns will carry on, but with Kody no longer in charge of their and that's the ending nobody thought they'd see.